And specifically, we are going to start looking at talking about people. Okay, so a very common topic that comes up. And we're going to look at, you know, the kinds of questions and the kinds of vocabulary that you might want to use. Hi, Attila, in the 3 different parts. It's 5 o'clock in the UK. I know it's very late for some people out there in Southeast Asia. We are thinking about changing the time, making it a little bit earlier. So hopefully that will suit everybody. Okay. Yeah, so we're going to look at, you know, the part 1, the part 2, the part 3. What are the kind of questions you might be asked? What are the kinds of language that you might want to use? And then also a little bit of planning for the part 2. Okay. Oh, we seem to have a question. Can everybody hear me okay? Can you just give me a yes or a no? No if you've gotten any problems. Okay, that's great. Seems to be okay pretty much across the board, loud and clear. Thank you. All right, so we'll get going. Normally, Jamie would be here. He is working, but he's not working in the UK. He will be here next week. So I will try and answer as many of your questions as come up in the chat as we go through. And then hopefully we'll also have a little bit of time at the end to go through the Q&A. He's working actually, Attila, he's out in Taiwan working, so a little bit difficult for him to attend the webinar, but he will be back next week and you'll be able to say hi and ask him how he did. Okay. So let's move on to talk about this. So we're going to sort of go through the 3 parts. Okay, and we'll answer some questions as we go through. That will come up in a moment. So in the speaking, right at the very beginning of the speaking, there are a couple of very quick questions that the examiner asks you. He asks, or she asks, for your full name. Then they say, what shall I call you? Which seems to cause a bit of confusion sometimes. So what shall I call you just means, you know, what name do you go by? Normally, you know, your first name, like Annalie for me, but it's not always 100% clear in different languages what the name is. You might have a nickname you want the examiner to use, totally up to you. But that's all they're asking when they say that, okay? So they will ask you then on question, you don't have to spell it, no, you just tell them what you'd like to be called, yeah? They're going to ask you questions on 3 different topics in the part 1. They will all be personal questions, so they will all be on familiar topics. The first one will always be about what you do or where you live. So it's very good, you know, make sure you have some really good vocabulary to talk about either your work or your studies or, you know, your house or your neighborhood, okay? Yeah, that's great, Patchy, that's exactly right, okay? So good to have vocabulary for work and study and housing. And then they'll ask you about 2 other things, family, hobbies, weekends, food, that kinds of things, okay? In the part 1, you want to, the whole thing is 5 minutes. The examiner is aiming to ask you about 8 questions probably in that 5 minutes. So, you know, if you give, let's say 3-4 sentences as an answer, that's a really good answer. That would be considered well developed. You don't have to say too much. The examiner won't let you keep talking for a long time. So, you know, there's no point going on, but, you know, 3 or 4 minutes, add some information, answer the question, add a little bit of information. Yeah, you can keep talking until the examiner stops you. The examiner is the one who's responsible for keeping to the time. So that's up to him. So you don't have to worry about that. You just have to say, you know, as much as you can. Okay. Make sure also, please, that you don't say that's it or that's all at the end of your answers. I've been hearing that a bit recently. It sounds a bit rude in English. Okay. So, you know, not necessary. Just finish and then the examiner will ask you the next question. Yeah, exactly. My name is, exactly as you said, Etala Sharif. People call me, or like I say, people call me Annalie, or, you know, just call me Annalie. Please call me Annalie, something like that. Okay. 5 minutes is the limit, but that is the examiner who is doing the timing. You don't have to worry about that. Okay. I wouldn't say Dinesh to conclude, because that's not really speaking language. That's more like something writing. You can say something like all in all. That's probably more appropriate for the part 3. Okay. Yeah, I would just, I mean, you can keep going, but as long as you've said 3 or 4 sentences, that's fine. Okay. You don't have to talk forever. Yeah, all in all is fine. That's a good thing. Do you know, the best thing to do is when you get to the end of what you want to say, you just make sure your voice goes down. Okay. And that immediately tells the examiner that you have finished speaking. There is nothing else you need to do. Okay. So your voice is, you know, on a level, kind of going up a little bit, come to the end, and that's the end of my answer. Yeah, that's all you have to do. Yeah, very informal. It's a speaking test. You're not supposed to be using formal academic language. You're having a conversation with the examiner. That is the best way to think about it. Just make sure you have a good, solid answer. Yeah, and 3 to 4 sentences in the part 1 is easily long enough. Okay. All right. Yeah, Abdul Karim, I'd add a couple more sentences to that. Okay. So, you know, I could say I work on it as I'm an English teacher. I generally work online, you know, my timetables, etc., etc. Yeah. So kind of highish voice or normal voice go down at the end. Okay. You don't need to introduce it, Ali. You just start speaking. Remember, this is not a formal test. It's not your, you know, your viva at the end of your PhD. It's just a conversation. Okay, that is really the best way to think about it. Informal, you know, easygoing. That's great. Okay. All right. So let's get back to the, yeah, well, exactly. Gossip with them, laugh with them, chat with them. That's all it is, you know. It's they're what they are assessing at the end of the day is, you know, can this person go and be in an English speaking country and talk to their colleagues, talk to the other students, and it's not difficult for the other students. It's not a burden. Okay. Yes, exactly. Okay, so in part 1, they may ask you about some people. So, for example, they might ask you about your family, okay, your family, extended family, okay, family members. Or they might ask you about friends. Yeah, that's another possible topic that they would talk about. Or they might ask you about we'll come into that in a minute. Well, yeah, family and relatives. Oh, nearest and dearest friends. Yeah, I think they're talking about colleagues here, like Neo said, because it's more like a presentation than a teacher. So your colleagues, your workmates, your classmates, if you're a student, that kind of thing. Okay, and finally, yeah, or your co-workers, exactly. Yeah, home. And in terms of the people, we would be talking about, yeah, your neighbors, the neighborhood you live in, maybe some issues related to your neighbors. Okay. So if we talk about family first, okay, a very good thing to do in terms of preparation for the speaking is to try and predict the kind of answers, the kind of questions that the examiner will ask you, so you don't get surprised. So it's a different kind of exercise, but just, think of some familiar topics and think hobbies. What might the examiner ask me about my hobbies? Okay. So if the topic was, he said, okay, now I'd like to ask you some questions about your family. What kind of questions do you think the examiner might ask? Okay, exactly, yeah. How do you pass time with your family? How do you pass the time with your family? Yeah, the size. Do you have a big family, a small family? Okay, yeah, exactly. The siblings, brothers and sisters. Yeah, again, the type of who do you love most? Yeah. Okay. Okay, right, exactly. Mr. Stark, how is the relationship with your family? Yeah. Okay, very good. It's more likely to be your relationship with them or the makeup of the family. You're probably not going to get asked about their hobbies or their work, yeah? But it will be a more kind of closer to you, okay? Yeah, do you live with them? Who do you look like? Yes, somebody wrote family resemblance. Sorry, I missed the name. Yeah, okay. What do you do with them? Who do you like spending most time with? Yeah, who's the favorite person in your family? Okay. And if it was neighbors, what kinds of questions might they ask about neighbors? Remember, this is part 1, so it's personal, yeah? So what kinds of questions? Yeah, how are they? How are your neighbors? How long have you known them? Do they bother you? Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, that's a bit more of a part 3 question. Yeah, exactly. Do you get along with your neighbors? Do you know them well? It's quite a good question, John. Part 1 is graded. The whole thing is graded, but generally speaking, the examiner will be paying more attention to part 3 than part 1, because part 1, it's at the beginning, you're a little bit maybe nervous, so they're kind of giving you a little bit of time, but it still forms part of the assessment. Yeah, okay. What about colleagues? Okay, maybe the trees are your neighbors. Don't know if you want to go that. Yeah, do you have a good relationship with your neighbors? What about if they ask you about your colleagues? Yeah, again, how are your colleagues? How's your relationship with your colleagues? Are they friendly? Yeah, okay. Again, same kind of questions. Do you get on with them? Okay, yeah, that kind of thing. Are they nosy? Very good. Okay, and yeah, like, who do you admire among your colleagues? And what about friends? Yeah, you could say, is it a nice atmosphere at work? Do you get on well with your colleagues? Good question, Rainer. I'll come to that in a minute. What about, yeah, so good time you spent with your friend. Who's your closest friend? Yeah, describe a good friend to me, those kind of things. Yeah, so today we're talking about people, but I think it's a really good idea to try and cover as many possible part 1 topics as you can, and think about it from the examiner's point of view, and try and preempt, try and predict the kinds of questions that you might get asked. Okay. Rainer, can you just put your question up again? Because I can't quite remember now, but I know that I wanted to comment on it. Can you just add your question to the chat again? Okay. They might not ask about boyfriend or girlfriend, because that could be a little bit sensitive. Okay. So they're careful about asking questions that might be sensitive. Yeah, okay. Yeah, we're coming on to the vocabulary, Dinesh, don't worry. And in fact, if they do ask you about family, they will generally say, in that case, is that okay? Because there might be a situation where somebody doesn't want to talk about their family. Okay, something has happened perhaps. So in that case, they will ask you if it's okay. You do have the opportunity to say, no, I don't want to talk about my family, and they will change the topic. However, that's really the only case where that happens, okay? Because it could be sensitive. That's not going to happen with something like hobbies, okay? Okay, so yes, Pachu, they ask the question, they evaluate you as the exam is going on, and they write down your scores. Immediately you leave the room, okay? Immediately that you leave the room, okay? So let's have a look now at some language. So we're going to look at some different people and think of some good adjectives, okay? So key thing when you're describing people, and it comes up a lot, and it really comes up in part 2, you've got a lot of good adjectives to describe that person. That's the first thing. And also good expressions to talk about relationships, because if they ask you to talk about a person, they will always ask you about the relationship. Yeah, so you could say risk taker, very active, adventurous. Any other adjectives? We're thinking specifically about adjectives here. Yeah, crazy, brave, risk taker, pretty, that's very good. Dynamic, like it, very nice. Yeah, outdoorsy is a word that people use if someone does a lot of sport. They're outdoorsy. Courageous. The place is breathtaking, Dimitri, but we're focusing on the people at the moment. Yeah, fit, likes to be challenged, that kind of thing. Okay. What about the grandfather we're focusing on in this case? Okay, very nice, Mustafa. Protective. Okay, yeah, enthusiastic, down to earth, friendly, supportive, caring. That's really nice. Loving, family man. That's really nice. Kind, respectable. Those are all really, really good words to use. Okay. Yeah, loving, caring, nurturing. That's very nice, Cleantas. I like that one. Yeah. Yeah, heartwarming describes the relationship rather than the person. Okay. Yeah, benevolent, kind-hearted. Those are great. Yeah. Okay, what about C? What kind of words could we use to... Okay, very nice. Studious is a lovely word. Hard worker, smart. Yeah, hardworking. Could be curious. Dweeb. Could be. Dedicated. That's great. Diligent. Lovely words you got coming up here. Yeah, nerd, nerdy. Could be. That's great vocabulary for the speaking. Bookish, John, that's brilliant. Yeah, determined. An avid reader, great collocation there, Sidhu. Yeah, bookworm, again, very nice. Engrossed. Yeah, we've got some really good words coming up there. Yeah. Laborious describes an action, not a person. So you can't describe a person as laborious. You describe something that somebody does as laborious. Okay, great. Creative, talented. I think we had skillful, industrious, Pachu. That's a great word. Imaginative. Yeah, of course they can be negative. Yeah. Patient. Yeah. Innovative. Great words that we're using there. Copycat could be in a different circumstance. Yeah. So yeah, they don't have to be positive adjectives. They, you know, they can be negative as well. Depends who you're describing and what your relationship is with them. Anyone who was here last week, we were talking about vocabulary, and one of the things we were talking about was connotation. So do make sure that you know whether the word you are using has a positive or a negative connotation. Because it might, you know, change what you're saying, and then it might become a bit confusing, okay? So yeah, you can use a positive or a negative connotation, but just make sure that you get it right. Yeah, very, very, very important, okay? So let's, if you didn't attend, you can watch it on YouTube. Yeah, so, sorry, yeah, on Facebook, I think is the best place to go. All right. So now so we've got a few words as well. So creative exactly would be D. Okay. Adventurous would be A. Yeah, absolutely. Supportive, I think all of these came up. Yeah, B. Conscientious, I don't think that came up, did it? C. This could be, to be honest, this could be any part of the speaking, depending on what. Most likely part 1 or 2. Yeah. So yeah, conscientious, very nice word to describe C. I think you could use it for D as well, maybe even B. Conscientious means that you are focused on detail and you make sure that everything is right. So very careful with your work. Yeah. The opposite would be sloppy. So someone who's sloppy doesn't care if they make a mistake. Someone who is, yeah, like a perfectionist. Very good, Rasmussen. Someone who is conscientious would be very concerned about making mistakes in what they were doing, and they would try very hard to check their work and make sure that that didn't happen. Yeah, Victor, that's a great word. Meticulous, very similar to conscientious. Painstaking, yeah, painstaking works as well. Yeah, meticulous, painstaking, conscientious, all have very, very similar meanings. Yeah. Considerate, most likely. Nature lover works for A. Yeah, that's great. Considerate, yeah, B. So kind. If you're considerate, you're kind. You think about others. Yeah. Sporty. This one came up, definitely. Yeah. So he's very sporty. Reliable. Yeah, B is what I would think. Yeah, so reliable granddad. You can always rely on granddad to take care of the kids. Ambitious. Yeah, fearless, Patrick. That's a really nice word. Yeah, I think probably A, maybe C. Yeah. It's not a, it's not a quiz. Could be A. I think C as well. Yeah. Working hard in order to be ambitious. Artistic is definitely D. Patient could be, yeah, I think D, B, you could definitely use it. Generous, maybe generous with their time. I think B is probably a good answer to that one. Yeah. Talented, D. Yeah. A as well. Yeah. Somebody who does extreme sports has got talent. Confident. Yeah, I think you're right, actually. All 4 of them have a confident air about them, don't they? So I think that works quite well. Certainly A, but possibly all of them. Okay. So let's thinking about part 1 now. Yeah, so very common question. Who are you closest to in your family? Okay. And then you would want to describe that person. So these adjectives, we're talking about qualities or characteristics of a person. Okay. So if that question came up in part 1, what would be your answer? Remember, you want to write sort of 3 or 4 sentences. So you're going to say who it is, and then you're going to talk a little bit more about that person. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, exactly. Okay. So for my example, we could say, in my family, I'm probably closest to my brother, Alex. Okay. Then I describe what he's like and a little bit about what he does. Okay. Yeah. I mean, your mother, your father, your son, your grandmother, doesn't matter what you say. But remember to always add a little bit more information. That's great. Yeah, I tell a talented, generous, and patient. Yeah, a little bit about what they do. For a part 1, that's fine. Like I said, 3 or 4 sentences is enough. Part 3, maybe more like 5 or 6 sentences, a little bit longer. Okay. But the fact is that you have extended your answer you're giving the examiner enough language for them to give you a score. That's why they say extend your answers and develop your answers. The only reason is that if I don't have a good amount, if you think about it like that, I need a big amount of your language so that I can give you a really true score. If you give me very short answers, then it's not easy for me to know, you know, can you make complex sentences? Can you use complex vocabulary? Because you're not giving me enough evidence. So make sure you give the examiner enough evidence that they can give you a good score. Yeah, that's what it comes down to. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, talk more, give them more language, more grammar, more structure, then they're going to be able to give you a higher mark. Okay. Okay. Similarly, they might say, which 3 adjectives would you use to describe yourself? Could be an answer. So if you had to describe yourself, what would you say? Which 3 adjectives? Yeah, and then why? Yeah. So remember, you're always answering the question why. Okay. Yeah, conscientious, reliable. Okay. Yeah, great. So a really, really good range of adjectives is what you need for here. Okay. So I might start by saying that's a difficult question because it's always hard to describe yourself. But then I give a couple of positive words and then a couple of negative ones. Okay. So 3 or 4 sentences is plenty for the part 1. Okay. But make sure that you're filling those 3 sentences with really good vocabulary, very precise vocabulary, and complex sentences. Okay. Yeah, not simple sentences. You want to use as many complex sentences as well. And they are, I remember now, Reina's question. The part 1 questions are often, they're written to elicit different tenses from you. Okay, so they would be expecting you to be able to use the right tense. That is one of the reasons behind, or the principles behind the part 1 is, you know, what are you doing now? What did you do before? That kind of thing. So they'll definitely be looking for a good range of tenses in the part 1. Okay. All right. Another thing, as I said, that you're going to be talking about is, yeah, you're strong and weak sides. That's great. Yeah. So describing the person and then also describing their relationship. Okay, this is very common in part 2. Very, very common. Describe a person, describe your relationship with them. Yes, Sidhu, a mix of different types of structures is what you need to be using. Okay. So we've got some, you know, specific vocabulary that we use to talk about relationships. Okay. A lot of phrasal verbs come up in relationships. So that's a really good area to focus on for talking about people. You know, you break up, you fall out, you make up, those kind of things. The relationship breaks down. So phrasal verbs and relationships is really, really good area to study. Okay. Part 2, Ramazan, you have to keep talking for 2 minutes. So I don't know how many sentences that is, but it's 2 minutes. Okay. Yeah. Make up, fall, not fall up. That's not one. So we're going to look at some expressions, and you have to tell me, do you use them with a friend? Do you use them with your partner, your husband, wife, girlfriend, boyfriend? Or can you use them in both sentences? Okay. So if you say that you get on well together or with each other, yes, that's definitely, it's a very generic word or phrase that you can use. Okay. Love at first sight. Yes, okay, that's definitely your partner, not your friend. Okay. I really enjoy their company. Okay, yeah, absolutely. Again, quite general. You can use it with any relationship whatsoever. We have a lot in common. Yeah, okay. So again, you can use that to talk about any relationship, family, friend, partner. Okay, we hit it off right away. Again, nice phrasal verb there. Yeah. You could use it with both. I think both. I think for me, it's a little bit more maybe on the partner side. Yeah. Not there. To hit it off means to immediately have a good relationship. Okay, so it's very similar to get on well, but it means that you immediately get on well. Okay. All right. We've been going out for about a year. So again, another phrasal verb, go out. Yeah, that's only your partner. That's describing a relationship, not a friendship. Okay. We've been together for 5 years. Okay, so yeah, again, only a relationship. Yeah, you can't use it to talk about a friend. Yeah? And we get on like a house on fire. Yeah, it's more like something you'd use with a friend. Sounds a little bit odd to use it with a partner, but it wouldn't be a major mistake. So if you look at that, you know, we have a lot of phrasal verbs there. We also have some idioms like getting on like a house on fire. So that's the kind of thing. Getting on like a house on fire means getting on really, really, really well. Okay. Doesn't seem to mean that if you think about a house being on fire, but it means just great, just love being in each other's company. Yeah, just very, very positive. Okay. So phrasal verbs, idioms, great for relationships. Okay. Well, yes, that's true. Maybe it's a very warm relationship. Okay. So if we have a look now at some example answers, yeah, you're partying in a high mood. So the moment we're thinking about the part one. Okay, so very common question: do you prefer spending time with your friends or your family? Okay. If you say, I prefer spending time with my family, again, that's not giving me any language that I can assess. Yeah, it's not giving me any vocabulary. It's not giving me any structure. All right. So it's better with a friend, Neo. It just sounds a bit better. So rather than just saying that, okay. Again, if you've been here in some of the previous ones about speaking, we have this areas. So you answer the question, okay. Nice spoken linking phrase to tell you the truth. Okay, so you're going to choose family. I think most people put family first, yeah. Yeah, or to be honest, yeah, to tell you the truth, honestly, anything like that. Then you explain why, so you give a reason, okay, because, and then you give a specific example, okay, which is like having dinner together, alternatives, so something else you might do. And then, you know, if you like, you can summarize. You don't have to summarize, okay? You can say it's the same. Yeah, of course. You say, I try and divide my time equally between my friends and my family. There's no right or wrong answer. You just got to answer what's true for you. So if we look at that one, we've got 3 sentences, okay? But they are all complex sentences, yeah? Okay, and we've got some, you know, different structures there. We've got gerunds, things like that, okay? We've got modals, we've got might. So we've got a nice range, and that's enough. You don't need to say more than that, okay? Yeah, it's always good to give an example, because it always allows you, you know, to say something specific. The more specific the thing you say, generally speaking, the better your vocabulary, because you're having to talk about something specific. Yeah. So I would say for all parts of the speaking, part 1, part 2, and part 3. Try and give specific examples, specific situations, because that almost always leads you to using more high-level vocabulary, more precise vocabulary. Generic answers mean generic vocabulary, not really helping you very much. Very similar to the writing, to the task 2. If you give specific arguments in your task 2 essay, you're going to use precise vocabulary. If you give generic arguments, tends to be the vocabulary won't be as good. Okay. Yeah, so the complex sentences means that you are joining 2 parts together. So who or which or that would be one way of doing it. Conjunctions like because or so that or if, conditionals, passives, things like that. These are all great structures to use that show that you can use a variety of language. Okay. Can we beat around the bush? Yes, very good expression for one thing, Raj. And yeah, as long as you're giving them language, remember, the only point of the speaking test is that you give the examiner enough language that they can give you an assessment, okay? There's no right or wrong answers. You've just got to give them enough. I need an amount of language that I can assess, okay? Beating around the bush means not answering directly, but sort of wasting time, you know, fillers, that kind of thing. Okay. So who is your best friend? Clearly John is not going to be a helpful answer. So again, using the areas. Okay. I'd say that really nice way to give an opinion in the speaking. Yeah. Don't say in my opinion, that's more of a written thing. Explain why, give an example, give something else. And then if you want, you can summarize, okay? Yeah, I mean, the example, it doesn't matter what, you know, but again, you know, give them some more information, all right? And here, again, we've got some of these phrases, these phrasal verbs: keep in touch, catch up. Great vocabulary to use to talk about friendships, to talk about relationships. Yeah, of course, you can say your husband's your best friend. I would say that, yeah, okay. Yeah, perfect. I have one person in particular who's really a very close friend, and that's X, yeah, okay. So again, we've got here 4 sentences, yeah, and we've got a range of language and a range of phrases, okay. And again, you know, honest and reliable, there's no structure there. You're not telling me what you can use, okay. So using the same thing, okay. Well, maybe you can say in my opinion. So you're explaining why, giving an example, giving another example, and then giving a summary. Yeah, okay. So good. And we're introducing, you know, we're using linking phrases. Very important to use linking phrases in the speaking, but, you know, they shouldn't be the same, or they shouldn't always be the same linking phrases that you're using in the writing. So do try and make sure you have a good range of spoken linking phrases, okay? Memorize, I don't like the word memorize, to be honest. That sounds a bit risky, but you should have a lot of phrasal verbs that you can use in the appropriately. So yes, okay. So this is quite a, you know, good example of a part 2. Some of you might have done this if you've done the speaking. So describe a person who influenced you as a child. Person, you know, talking about a person comes up in a lot in part 2, also places. So, you know, if you have that vocabulary to describe qualities and to describe relationships, Doesn't matter whether you're talking about someone in your family or a friend or a colleague, or, you know, you can use the same language. So you're going to be able to use that language in lots of different situations. Okay. So somebody who had an effect on your life, somebody who maybe changed the way you thought. Could be someone you know, could be a famous person. Again, it doesn't matter as long as you use as much language as you can. Yeah, yeah, exactly. So, and do speak for, try and speak for the 2 minutes or as close as you can to the 2 minutes, okay? The examiner needs that amount of language to be able to assess. You have 1 minute to prepare. I would always suggest you take that minute because it's very easy to run out of things to say. And a good thing to do is basically you kind of underline the keywords and then you make some notes under those keywords, okay? We do have another webinar which is specifically just on the part 2, where we talk a lot more about planning your part 2 talk. But generally speaking, I would have headings. Using question words as headings is always a really good idea. Who, when, what, why. Then make a few notes, just a few keywords. And then, you know, you have that. And yeah, you can talk about what happened in the past. You can talk about how things are now. You can talk about things in the future. Again, specific occasions, specific events is great because it allows you to use more precise, high-level vocabulary, okay? So again, you know, you just make a little, doesn't have to be a table, but you just have a few notes. And then you just use a few key words that are going to be like triggers that are going to help you talk about this situation for 2 minutes. But I mean, one thing is, if you just answer the bullet points, you're almost certainly going to stop speaking after 30 seconds. Okay, so the bullet points are just there to give you some ideas, to help you a little bit. It's not a task. You don't have to complete the bullet points in order or anything like that. You can talk about anything you like as long as it's related to the topic. Which is why I'm saying, you know, if you have specific events or occasions that you can talk about, it's much easier to talk about those in detail for a long time than it is to just talk generically, okay? Yeah, don't know about that, Clientes, I'm not sure. So don't focus on the bullet points, focus on speaking for 2 minutes, okay? And focus on detail. Doesn't matter if you spend the whole 2 minutes talking about one specific day that you spent, for example, with your father. That was a really great day. Absolutely fine, as long as you keep talking, okay? So, and again, you know, link these things together, have introductory phrases, introductory linking words that make it easy for the examiner to follow what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, if you start talking about your father and then you run out of things to say, talk about somebody else, yeah? Oh, another person who's had a lot of influence on my life is my grandfather. Start talking about your grandfather. It's fine, but introduce it, make it clear to the examiner what you are doing. Okay, so don't just start talking about your grandfather. It might get very confusing. Make it clear that this is another person that you are starting to talk about now. Okay. So yeah, and yeah, another piece of advice, try and make sure you don't repeat the same information. Some people, they kind of end up going round in circles and they're saying the same thing 2 or 3 times. That's going to lose you marks. So make sure that you're always moving forward with what you say. You're always saying new things. You're not going back and just repeating the same thing all the time. Yes, I hear Joe. That's great. Yeah. Okay. Detail, Patchy. That's how you avoid it. Detail, 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 detail. Okay. That's the only way to speak for 2 minutes. I need to start wrapping up so that you've got some time. So yeah, so you introduce who you're going to talk about. Let me tell you a bit about him, okay? Or let me give you some background information. These are great ways to add a little bit more information and, you know, extend your talk without actually saying anything, beating about around the bush, as Ali, was it Ali said it? Sorry, I can't remember who said it. Okay, so expressions like what I admire most about him, the reason why we get on so well together. These are really nice ways of having complex sentences. Yeah. I'm not sure what you mean by context, Burka again. If you can just explain that a little bit more. Yeah. Only in terms of the language, not in terms of the content. No. Okay. Sorry, Raj. Sorry. Yes. I couldn't quite remember. Thank you, Sweater. Okay. If you finish talking about one person, start talking about somebody else. Or if you finish talking about one place, start talking about another place. That's perfectly fine. Just make sure it's clear that you are moving on to somebody else. Another good way to extend it is to start with a kind of general couple of minutes, okay? So the question is, talk about somebody who's had an influence on you. You can say, well, you know, quite a few people have had an influence on me in my life. I think it's very important that you look around and you find people that are role models. In particular, and the person I'd like to talk about today is my father. Okay, 20 seconds, you haven't really said anything, but you've been giving the person very good language. Okay, so bit of a general introduction on the subject will give you a little bit of time. Yeah, and then you move on and say, but you know, yeah, in particular, or the particular person who influenced me that I'm going to tell you about now is da 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 da. Yeah, okay. If you have to talk about something you bought recently, you know, talk about, well, I don't buy very much. I'm a student. I don't really have very much money to spend on things. However, last week I bought blah, blah, blah. Yeah, it just gives you a little bit of time. Okay, so general introduction and lots of specific detail on specific occasions and events. I think that's the way to get your 2 minutes. Okay. So yes, so introducing everything that you like to say, that you're going to say, lots of good flow, keep it moving forward, don't go back and repeat the same information. Okay. Lastly, we're just going to have a little bit of a look at part 3. Again, we do have a webinar that's specifically on part 3. In this case, remember, it's general. So you're not going to be talking about somebody you know or a relationship that you have, but you're going to be talking about relationships in general or groups of people in general. You can be talking about your country or culture. That's something that comes up quite a lot in part 3. I'll go back to it when I've finished, okay? So sometimes people talk about stereotypes. So we're just going to do this very quickly. So if we look at the flag, I'll go back to it, I promise. Let me just come to the end first. Whose flag is this? Yes, England, very good. What stereotypes do you know about? It's the other way around, the Swiss one. Okay. Drinking. Yes, drinking. I'd say that's a stereotype that's true. They don't drink water. Yes, tea. Yes, very much a lot of tea. Have to have your cup of tea with you all the time. Colonial. Yes, unfortunately. I'm not quite sure what balcony means. Does that something? Cup of joe? Yeah, Prince Harry, don't talk to me about, but yeah, fish and chips. Okay, good. Next one. Oh yeah, Scotland. This is Jamie, because Jamie's Scottish. Do you have any stereotypes from Scotland? Go on your bike. It does look a bit like an envelope. Yeah, yeah, whiskey kilts, that kind of thing. Yeah. Careful about money. Very diplomatically put there, Neo. Yeah, tricky accent. Yeah. Okay, that you'll be talking about stereotypes about your own country. They're not going to say what's the stereotype of Scottish people, but you might have to talk about stereotypes. Okay. So for example, I just want to move on a bit so we got some time. So some nice expressions to make generalizations. You can say English people are supposed to have good manners, be very polite. Okay. But maybe that's not always true. Okay. Or these people have a reputation for being, bye-bye Attila, for being stingy. That came up last week if you were here. You can finish it off in on the video. Okay. So, or Australians are famous for being. So there's just some nice phrases you can use here if you are going to talk about a group of people. Doesn't have to be a nationality. It might be a, you know, the young, the old, the rich, teenagers, that kind of thing. Yeah. Okay. All right, so I think that's everything. Okay, so we'll go through some questions in a minute. Okay, we got 5 more minutes, Attila, that's all. So do remember that if you want to get your speaking or your writing evaluated, that is a service that is offered. You do have to pay for it, but you do get very specific advice on where you are in terms of the band score and what you need to do to improve. Okay. Part 3 is also 5 minutes long. Okay. And Facebook and YouTube, you can see the previous webinars that we've done, and you can, so I'm just going to go back to that one. You can also ask questions. Okay, there you go. Is that it? No, back a bit. You can ask questions. You can, oh, thank you very, very much for putting those up on chat, because I'm not able to do that when I'm hosting. So yeah, you know, those are really good resources for having a look at different parts. Okay. So I'm just going to have a look at some questions in the Q&A. Rasmussen says, if I don't know the answer, what to do? Remember that, you know, these answers are very general. Part 1 and part 2 are about, you know, things you know, about people you know, where you live. So it should be, you know, it shouldn't be difficult. There shouldn't be a situation where you don't know the answer. Okay, you're just having a conversation. In terms of part 3, one thing I would do, you know, again, preparation, find as many part 3 type questions as you can and think about what you would say. Okay, so, you know, this is just preparing for the test. Look at lots of different situations, topics, and think of different things that you could say. Okay. You can also, you know, reading and listening to things that are related to those topics that come up very frequently in IELTS, things like education, technology, pollution. You know, make sure you'll get good vocabulary if you do that, and you will also get very good content. You'll get very good arguments that you can use not only in the speaking but also in the writing as well. Okay, Shaman says sometimes the examiner doesn't look at this and it makes the conversation difficult. The reason why sometimes the examiner is not looking at you is because if they want to focus on what you're saying, it's a lot easier to focus on what you're saying if you're not looking at somebody, okay? So that's why they're not being rude. So just keep going. Don't pay any attention to it, okay? It's just because they're trying to focus, okay? Yeah, about the language, and this came up as well. Okay, don't use academic vocabulary. This is a speaking test. You should be, love you too, Etela. This is a speaking test. You need to be using informal language. So you can use idioms, you can use phrasal verbs, you can use contractions. Night, night, Attila. It's informal language. Don't be using the same vocabulary, the same language in your writing and your speaking, okay? One of the parts of the IELTS is they're making sure that you can do both. You can do academic vocabulary and you can do informal vocabulary, okay? Okay, somebody asked about talking about your family. So just to reiterate, if they ask you about your family, they will say, is that okay? Okay. If you do not want to talk about your family for whatever reason, it's perfectly okay for you to say, I would rather not do that, okay? And the examiner will choose a different topic, okay? That's the only situation where you are able to change the topic, okay? Only that, but it's perfectly okay in that situation to do that, okay? Yeah, complex sentences, Denise is asking, it's important to use a range of structures, a range of different tenses, all of those kinds of things, yeah, okay. Pachu, I would try and use contractions because that is natural spoken English, okay? We do use contractions all the time. So just try and make sure you're using contractions, okay? Last question, Kwekwe, sorry, says, is it okay to use or yes, if you're thinking about things to say, it's perfectly okay. It's quite natural to pause to think about content. It's usually very obvious to the examiner if you're pausing to think about content rather than language. Pausing to think about vocabulary or grammar will lose you marks. Good way to get around that is to use fillers. Yeah, let me just think about that for a moment, or that's a difficult question. Okay, guys, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to stop there. We've already gone over. I hope that was helpful. Thank you very much for joining. Thank you very much for all of your great suggestions and questions. If I didn't answer your question today, go on to the Facebook page and ask your question there, okay? Good luck if you've got your test coming up in the, well, at any time, but particularly in the last few weeks, okay? I really, really hope that you do very well, okay? So thank you very much for everything, and goodbye, and have a great day, okay? Thanks, guys. Sleep tight. Take care. Okay. Bye-bye.